Hey, this is Jim Curl with Three Town Hope, and this is Hope on the Streets. About 2 years ago, I met a man named Michael McAdoo, who spent most of his life trying to prove that God didn't exist. He wasn't just casually doing this. He wasn't just asking questions. He was determined. And in his own words, he was on a mission. He studied it, he challenged it, and he pulled at every thread of Christianity, trying to tear it apart piece by piece. He wasn't searching for truth, he was trying to dismantle it. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Because the deeper that Michael dug, the more he kept running into the same thing, Jesus. Over and over again. What he thought would dismantle Christianity actually led him straight to Christ. Until one day, he wasn't arguing anymore. Michael McAdoo believed. Now you'd think that this would be the high point of his story, the breakthrough moment. The turning point, the part where everything starts to get better, but that's not where I met Michael. I met him later, when everything had fallen apart after his diagnosis. He had aggressive cancer. It's the kind that doesn't give you time to figure things out. It really forced reality right in front of his face, and as if that weren't enough, life had already taken almost everything else from him. Because of his illness, he lost his job, which led into losing his home and his stability. He lost the life that he once knew, and he found himself living at Victory Mission, living in a shelter, just trying to make it through each day. And from the outside, this doesn't look like redemption. It looked like the end. But what I saw was something different, completely different. Michael, who was so weak he was barely able to walk some days, he would call me and he'd say, "Hey Jim, can you come up here? I want to talk to these guys." Not because he needed anything, but because he had something to give. He would drag himself into that room and he'd sit down, oftentimes winded, trying to catch his breath. And he'd pour out whatever strength he had left, encouraging them, speaking life into them, pointing them to Jesus. Reminding them that no matter how far they'd gone, they weren't beyond hope. Think about that. A man who once tried to prove that God was not real was now spending his final days proving that He is. Not with arguments, not with debates, but with his life right in the middle of suffering. I remember a while back, we were getting ready to record a podcast together, and I could tell Michael was nervous. I could see it. He wasn't sure how this thing was going to go, and so I tried to encourage him a little and said, "Michael, you're going to do great." And he just kind of side-smiled at me, and he said, "I think I'll be all right, Jim. I've acted in movies before." And I remember laughing, like, of course, out of everything he could have said, of course he acted in movies. And on top of that, come to find out, he'd actually been in one of my favorite movies growing up. And I just sat there thinking, man, this guy has lived a whole life that most people would chase. And now what? None of that mattered to him anymore. The spotlight, no recognition, no chasing the next thing. He was focused on one thing, making sure that people knew Jesus. Towards the end, his body was breaking down and you could see it. Every step he took a great amount of effort. Every conversation cost him something, but his faith was stronger than ever. He didn't have bitterness. He didn't have anger. Just clarity and urgency and hope. And it hit me. This is what real transformation looks like. Not just a change in belief, but a completely changed life, from trying to tear God down to spending your last breath lifting Him up. From chasing everything this world offers to realizing Jesus is the only thing that actually satisfies. Romans 15:13 says, "Now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." And I saw that lived out with Michael. So here's the challenge. What have you been doing with the time that you've been given? Because Michael, with everything stacked against him, used what little time he had left to point people to Christ. He didn't wait until he felt better. He didn't wait for life to make sense. He just simply said yes. And so here's the encouragement to you. If God can take a man who spent years trying to disprove him and turn him into someone who brings hope to others in his final days, I promise you, He's not done with you. It is not too late. You're not too far gone. Your story isn't over. Turn to Him and let Him change everything.